pravých mužů zóna, karty šustí, kulky bzučí, krávici tu plně pučí. Cítím se v té pohodě, jako ryba ve vodě.
Hello, listening people.
Hello.
You're listening to Spit and Polish presents Pictures Powwow. I am one of your hosts, Ryan Swinski.
And I'm Bartek.
Hi, Bartek. How are you?
Good, Ryan. How are you?
I'm doing fairly well. I'm alive, and I'm in the same room as you. I'm looking at you right now, and I've survived whatever perils have happened in the interim of episodes, and I'm here excited to talk about a movie that's come recommended.
Yes, you survived the trolls.
I survived.
Sorry, the goblins.
I survived Nilbog
Yes.
from last week's episode. We are here to talk about a movie that's come recommended. I have recommended the movie for this one. You recommended last week's. I recommend this week's. And then next week, it's our listening people's suggestion.
Oh, organized structure.
We are organized. We are structured. For this one, we're going to be covering the 1964 Czech and/or Czechoslovakian film Lemonade Joe. But we are not alone on this one. We wouldn't dare cover Lemonade Joe on our own. We need to ingratiate other people into the world of Czechoslovakian cinema and into the world of Lemonade Joe.
Well, I'm looking around the room, and are you talking about that?
We do have people on a call, Bartek. We called in some experts.
Yeah?
Some people who always have very strong opinions.
Mm-hmm.
Bartek, tell everyone who can't read the title of the episode who our guests are.
I can't read either, but thankfully I know what it says. We are joined in this episode by the hosts of the Contrarian Podcast, Alex and Julio.
Hello, fellas.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you
I
doing?
guess we're the Western people now. We're the official Western guests on your show.
I mean, you are from the biggest country of the West, America.
And we're from Texas. Sort of.
Are you wearing cowboy hats as we record this?
Stetsons.
Oh yes, Stetsons. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I appreciate a Stetson as well. Are you wearing boots? Your boots with your
Well,
spurs?
we're in our home right now, so it means we're not wearing a hat or shoes, but we do have our belts on, which we both sides holstered guns, and then we have our AKs strapped across our chests. So that's just how the Texans live in their homes.
Yeah, and I don't know about Alex, but I'm wearing my my warm woolies.
and you're wearing your holsters nice and low. So tell us all about what you guys do on the Contrarians, and of course, just so we get this all out of the way, which one's which? Who's Julio? Who's Alex? Just so we all are on the same page. We don't want any mistranslations.
Well, I'm
here.
the one who sounds like he would be named Alex, and Julio's the one that sounds like he would be named Julio. Just to break it down, pretty standard, or just to its most elementary quality. But no, I'm Alex. Julio's the other one. Julio, what do we do on the Contrarians?
The Contrarians, we rage against the Rotten Tomatoes machine. In fact, Ryan and Bartek had been there once. They raged against the original Secret Life of Walter Mitty. What we do is we take a movie's tomato meter score. If it's fresh, we argue against it. We talk about the movie as if it was rotten, as if it was a bad movie. If it's a rotten movie on the tomato meter score, we argue for all the good things on it. We talk about it as if it was fresh. And then on the second half of the show, we tell you how we really feel. It is a lot of fun, as you probably knew if you listened to the Secret Life of Walter Mitty episode, where the first half, all four of us were trashing it. And then in the second half, it was Ryan and Bartek telling us how wrong we were for not being crazy about it.
Yeah.
It was fun.
What fools you are. And what are some examples of some really acclaimed films and some really poorly received films that you've had to give the contrarian treatment to?
Julio said it's fun, which that is not always the case. There's been some real stinkers that we've had. I mean, back in our Inceptual days, we did Paul Blart Mall Cop. Trying to make that movie sound good is, a very daunting task, and not one that I recommend to anybody. I guess modern times, we've done 100% movie before and just made a case for why Charlie Chaplin wasn't as charming and funny as a lot of people thought he was. recently, I don't know.
I mean, very recently, I was gonna say Duplex, which I think Ryan likes, or at least he
We
likes.
did it on the pod, motherfucker.
We did.
We loved it. We loved Duplex, and you were fools. Fools.
The polished
Hey,
titles.
for at least for half the show, we pretended to love it.
That movie
So
was
that's something.
torturous. But we always get really fun dichotomies. Like we did the Hulk Hogan vehicle No Holds Barred from 1989, which I love in a very campy way. And just it was like pulling Julio's toenails out with pliers, him watching that movie. So it can lead to some interesting discussion. And we always have a good time. I have to explain to Julio why movies like the original Texas Chainsaw Massacres are amazing. And he goes on about what he goes on about, and I just, scroll my Twitter feed. But
Yeah. Winona Ryder is Julio's whole deal.
yes.
Well, she certainly was for 2020. A couple years ago, John Travolta was our guy.
Yeah.
So every now and then we'll do little arcs. Sometimes some bigger than others. But
I would recommend a Paul Giamatti summer.
Ooh.
You'll never go unhappy. Paul delivers all the time.
But he's
Yeah,
your
like in the
guy.
water.
I gotta feel like Paul Giamatti is your thing. I don't want to step on your on your toes,
Oh,
your
right,
Giamatti
all
toes,
right.
as they were.
You can have Bruce Cook, the star of one single film, Thunderpants, in which a boy farts so hard he can fuel rockets to go to space.
Ryan, I'm not sure if
Sounds amazing.
I'm not sure if y'all have done it on the podcast, but are you a fan of Win Win? I've tried to get Julio to do Win Win on the podcast.
I don't know Win-Win.
Oh, that's
Paul Giamatti.
yeah, that's Paul Giamatti. He's a high school like PE coach, I believe, or a teacher, and he kind of takes this boy under his wing and trains him to be a amateur wrestler. And like it's Paul Giamatti, Bobby Cannavale's in it. It's a hell of a journey. I definitely recommend y'all check it out. Maybe that could be the next crossover episode.
Well, hopefully. I mean, our next Paul Giamatti movie has always been stated as The Nanny Diaries, of course, the famous film with Scarlett Johansson.
Good Lord.
We're going down this road. Let's get back on the road of the film we are going to be discussing today. We are going to be discussing the 1964 film from former Czechoslovakia, now the Czech Republic, Lemonade Joe. This is a film that if you have not seen it, which I won't deny is a great possibility, because most people English-speaking have probably not seen this film. European people have most likely at least heard of it. It's very popular there, from my understanding. If you have not seen it, this film is available. It is available pretty easily. It's on Amazon Prime. Last I checked, the transfer of it was a little lackluster and the subtitles were a little less polished up than in other places, but that may have improved. Alex watched it on Amazon Prime, so he can talk about how that experience was. Apparently, the film is on YouTube now. So you can even watch this on YouTube with English subtitles as well. And I'm not saying that the film is surprisingly easy to find through other darknet type means. I'm not saying
Darknet.
I'm not saying that it's surprisingly easy to find that way, and I wouldn't recommend that you do that, but apparently it is. And I'm not saying that I know for a fact, but apparently it is. I'm not, and DVD-wise, if you're a person like me that likes to find physical media, do your research with Lemonade Joe, because there's 2 copies of that, one that's a shitty transfer and one that's a good one. So there you go.
You made one mistake.
Man,
there,
how can you
Ryan.
even tell?
Oh
I
God!
can tell.
Here we go. This is Julio does this shit. No, I can swear on here, right?
No, you fucking cunt.
You can't swear.
Fucking hell. Julio does this shit all the time with me about transfers. That's like a regular occurrence on the Contrarians about, oh, how can you tell what's a good transfer and what's not? I'm glad to be in similar company that you understand what necessitates or what qualities a good transfer has versus a bad one.
Well, that's true. I was just referencing the fact that the aesthetic of this movie would make it harder to know if what you're watching is a poor transfer or if it's actually what the filmmaker intended.
Well, we can
because
talk
it's
about
not
that.
traditionally, traditionally shot, I would say.
So, Lemonade Joe, if you have not seen it, listening people, go check it out, go watch it. We're going to discuss it. It's really easy to find. You have no excuses. We definitely say give it a watch. It may or may not be your thing, but it is definitely a thing that most people have not experienced in their life before, and we say just watch it yourself and come back. I would love it, Alex, if you could tell us the synopsis, the plot of Lemonade Joe, just as a quick refresher. Give us a quick rundown of the plot of Lemonade Joe.
Gladly. It is basically, the overview is it's a satire of a Western, but the story of this particular movie is of this town in Arizona in the late 1800s that's overwrought with whiskey and, you know, just absolute chaos, pandemonium, horrors, all the whole gamut when it comes to the prototypical Western. And a known gunman, a member of law enforcement, a man of the law, Lemonade Joe, comes to town and basically is, you know, the women are smitten with him. The men fear him, but he's really just a man that's there to peddle his product. Cola Loca lemonade?
Cola Loca.
Yeah.
Cola Loca.
Yeah, he's a soda pop salesman that's just there to sell his soda across town, which is lemonade. And through that, it gets him into these series of scenarios with the brother of the man who runs the local whiskey bar, and who's a magician, and
Yes.
his last name is it Badman, bad guy?
Yeah, Badman.
Batman.
Batman.
Yeah. So the story is basically the story of capitalism. This guy comes in to make sure his product overtakes the town, and he'll crush anyone that gets in his way because of it. And he won't even kill them. If someone crosses him, the worst indignance he can do is make them say they'll use his product. And but it's also like this weird Blazing Saddles type comedy that's 10 years ahead of its time. So there's many layers to Lemonade Joe, but at its core, it's a story of a salesman who came into town to take it over.
Exactly right. Bartek, he just gave us the plot rundown of it. But could you give us a little rundown of what Lemonade Joe is in the context of what Lemonade Joe is, in terms of when and where and why this exists? Can you do that? Or is that too complicated?
Can I do the thing that you thoroughly researched, you're asking?
Okay, I'll do it. This film is a film made in Czechoslovakia when it was under the iron boot of the Soviet Union. This film is a film that was made when Czechoslovakia was a satellite state, a Marxist, communist, Leninist, socialist state of the Soviet Union. It is exactly as Alex described it. It is a satirical Western made under that umbrella. It is a harsh critique of capitalism, but also, if you really want to, it's also a scathing critique of communist rule as well. This is a film that dips its toes in both waters depending how you look at it. But most importantly, this is a part of a genre called the Red Western, which is westerns made by Soviet countries, which is a genre all on its own. So when you watch this film, you may not know that, but you will quickly realize that as you watch the film as it goes along, because its ideals are not as the same ideals as what you would see in a traditional Western that this is obviously aping off of. As Alex said, Lemonade Joe is supposed to be your gunslinging good guy lawman, but in fact he is a horrible, narcissistic, capitalist pig dog that is only invested in profit and does not give a shit about anyone other than himself, practically. And if he does, it is just to further his own capitalistic agenda. And the bad guys are just bad. They just don't like that this capitalist guy is coming in telling them that they have to drink the product, which in this movie is lemonade. They take the most puffy, innocent, soda pop, all fizz, all no taste kind of product and use it as an imagery and as a tool to have a commentary on Western ideals. That's the context of this film in some way, shape, or form, and we'll talk about it more so. Julio, Alex, obviously I'm going to ask what's your history and relationship with this movie, and imagine you're not going to have a large one, but just to further that, what is your history and relationship with foreign cinema as well?
Well, yeah, take it, Julio.
I was gonna say I don't know that as far as this film, I think Alex and I have the same history, which is like you told us about it. Before that, we didn't know it existed. But as far as foreign cinema, I mean, I was lucky enough to grow up in a city that, while I'm originally from Peru, and I grew up in the capital, and while it's true that basically while I was growing up, at least, the exhibition was mostly dominated by American product, by movies from the United States. There were spaces that would show just world cinema, and so growing up, I was exposed to some of it. At least I think sometimes I talk to my friends here in the States, and it seems like it was a lot harder, depending on where they grew up, to find that opportunity. Back before the internet, back before anything. Could you watch a movie from somewhere that wasn't the United States in theaters? And so I had that opportunity. That said, I had never seen anything like this movie before, which was pretty refreshing. But I grew up reading subtitles. I was like, I'm not averse to watching foreign cinema. In fact, I enjoy it. I wish I did more of it. But of course, my priority usually seems to be catching up with whatever the North American market is producing before I move on to something else.
Yeah, for myself, it's having grown up in America, especially Midwest America. It's, as a child, I didn't know there were movies that weren't Star Wars or Terminator or something like that. So it wasn't until I kind of got to college and really reached out and stretched my bounds that I really learned about foreign cinema. While Julio was talking, and when you posed the question, I was really trying to think hard about what the first foreign movie, foreign to me, I should say, movie I watched from cover to cover was, and I think it was Audition, the Asian
yes.
horror film, and so I think that's kind of disturbing in and of itself, but since probably about the age of college, I've tried to integrate foreign cinema as much into my proverbial ether as I can. Julio and I just did an episode, a 2-hour-long discussion about blue is the warmest color the other night. So it's I think a good portion of especially my Criterion movies I own, I try to branch out as much as I can. That all being said, like Julio said, even with my somewhat limited knowledge of foreign cinema and history, I didn't really have too much familiarity with Lemonade Joe, and so coming into it, coming off of Paleface, I wasn't quite sure what to expect with the spit and polish recommendations, and this movie kind of blew my mind, to be completely honest. So I'm kind of glad I discovered this area and then covered this blind spot.
I was gonna, before I get to you, Bartek, I was gonna ask, and you kind of answered in a minor way, are there any particular countries or genres that you like exploring or want to explore more from foreign cinema? And you kind of touched upon, you watched Audition, which I was going to say before we record, I was saying to Bartek, I bet you if I ask this question, Alex is going to say horror movies from Asia or other countries are kind of his jam.
Right.
That's pretty endearing that you've gotten to know him so well, basically through our show.
Oh, and when he's been on our pod before, when we talked about one of the previous times we've talked on one of our podcasts, we talked about we want a good website that tells us what the proper cut of a movie is. And Alex, you brought up horror movies being a great example of a genre that really needs that.
Yeah. I don't know if there's a specific region of the world or genre that I need more exposure to. I feel like the majority of my foreign film knowledge does lie in the French area. That seems, especially over the past decade, that seems to be where a lot of movies come in from. I think there's a lot of mid 20th century Japanese movies I really feel that I need to catch up on, or just not catch up because it's fucking 50 years ago, but you know what I mean, in the sense of just for my own knowledge and education. Julio, is there a specific time period or country you feel like you're lacking in,
Or genre?
Well, I know that I struggle with Asian cinema in general. There's something about like all the great hits, all the Asian movies that most cinephiles will tell you need to watch. I have trouble like getting into them. Sometimes it works wonderfully, sometimes it doesn't. Like going back a little bit to horror, I guess something like The Host. Everybody loves The Host, and when I watched it, I couldn't get into it. The tone of it just doesn't jive with me. Like more recently, Okja, when it was released on Netflix. I mean, I know that was a little more divisive, but still, it was something that I watched it and I'm like, I get it, and I get why somebody would like it, but it just doesn't 100% work for me. So that's always kept me from trying more. But it's something that I would like to get to the point where I manage to get on its wavelength and just enjoy the way that other people do. And I think it's just a matter of just tasting more of it, experimenting more. I mean, I loved Parasite last year, and that kind of renewed my commitment to I need to keep trying because if I watch 10 movies and out of those 10 one it's like Parasite, then it's worth it.
Yeah, people loving South Korean cinema over the last few years with movies like Parasite, like Burning, like The Handmaiden. There are a few great films coming out from over there, and the Snowpiercer being far more an American one, but that kind of introduced more Western audiences to that director and kind of made people want to go back and look at his work too. So there's obviously been a greater appreciation for South Korean and Asian cinema. Obviously, Parasite winning the Best Picture, big splash in that regard. I know you, Bartek, you're far more of an Asian cinema lover than I am, in terms of you like your anime stuff and you like Bollywood, which is the big one. You're the big Bollywood guy, which none of us have even mentioned in any of this discussion. One of the biggest film industries in the world. None of us wanted to touch.
Yeah, possibly the biggest. I haven't watched much lately, but yeah, I do try to watch foreign cinema wherever I can. In fact, on this podcast, every 6 weeks, I make myself pick one. I struggle sometimes just trying to find the right ones, but, I'm not sure that I've failed yet. Last week, I guess, Troll 2 is sort of American, but we argued for its Italianness.
Yes.
We even have a running joke right now that there's a French-African film I remember liking, and I want to recommend at some point, but I can't find English subtitles for it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, my answer, though, would be pretty similar to Alex, though. I'd want to try to branch out just wherever as much as I can.
I have a complete blindness for French cinema. Whenever people say, oh, you like foreign cinema, it's very similar to what Alex kind of mentioned, where there's a big, if you're a film person, French cinema is always very important, but I've never really touched much of it. I've always ventured out into Korean cinema even before it became as popular as it did. One of my first foreign films was the original Old Boy. I remember seeing that like a year or so after it came out, and it just blew me away. And I was like, oh, this is a style and a genre I really like. And that's a director whose work I've kept up with over the years. I really liked his vampire movie Thirst, which is a great movie worth checking out. And then a genre I love, which of course, to go back to the conversation of the topic, is I love seeing any other country's interpretations of Westerns. I grew up on spaghetti Westerns. I grew up on Hollywood Westerns. I grew up with Australian interpretation of Westerns. I love a good interpretation of a Western. Hence, we did Paleface last time, which was a comedic take on a Western. I like Blazing Saddles, but I like the Western genre in general, but I really appreciate a foreign take on it, or a more abstract take on a Western, because it is if you're into film, it is the staple of film. Every genre is a Western, as they say. And I like exploring different types of that. One of my recent favorite weird Westerns was one of the last good Michael Fassbender movies, a New Zealand-made Western called Slow West. and Ben Mendelsohn's the villain. So you know it's
What
going to
is
be a
this?
good time.
One of the last good Michael Fassbender movies. Come on. What is this?
When was the last good movie of his? Snowman?
What was the last thing he made?
Snowman? X-Men Apocalypse?
There you go.
So my time gauge, or like the way I perceive time, completely just fell apart probably around 2008. So like I think anything in the past 12 years is recent. So I understand exactly where you're coming from now that I'm thinking about it. I don't know. Hunger would probably be the last really good Michael Fassbender
And
movie.
this and
That
Slow
was a
West came
Michael
out in
Fassbender movie.
and Slow West came out in like 2015. So
Okay.
Steve Jobs. Come on. Steve Jobs was great.
yeah, it was all right, but it's no Slow West.
If NyQuil doesn't work, then yeah, it's really good.
It's no Ashton Kutcher's Jobs, but whatever. So I love a good Western, and a genre that another foreign cinema that I've really grown to love is, of course, Czechoslovakian cinema, or Czech cinema, specifically when it was Czechoslovakia. This era, the 1960s and 70s and early 80s era, is something that I've really been exploring over the last few years because of Lemonade Joe.
Yep.
My history with Lemonade Joe is a very long and complicated one, and it will link to Bartek's, which is when we were at university, in our final year at university studying drama, we had to make a play. We had to collaborate and make a play, and earlier in the year, I do this art page, and I made a funny title for a picture, which was a horse in space. And I just put two words together. I put Soviet Western, and I just put them together. And then I kept thinking about those two phrases, and I said,
It was like a running joke for the year.
It was a running joke. I was like, oh man, is there such thing as a Soviet Western? Like, what's the message of a Soviet Western? Like, stranger walks into town, realizes there's capitalism, and shrieks, and then shoots his gun in the air and says, worship Stalin? Like, it was always these ideas, and I realized, is there such thing as a Soviet Western? And then when we were making our play, we decided, let's make ourselves a Soviet Western on stage, and we made it, and it was just called Soviet Western. And one of the inspiration points was this film, Lemonade Joe, because you do a quick Google search, Soviet Western, you get introduced to all these films and the genre, which is more primarily called a Red Western, which I don't like as much because I didn't come up with it.
Yeah.
And Lemonade Joe was always one of the top one recommended. And you see the poster and it's bright yellow and it's weird. And you got this guy singing at a piano and it was highly recommended and it was a comedy. And I was like, I want to see not only a Soviet Western, but I want to see a comedic one.
Yeah.
And I've never experienced Czech cinema before, so let's give it in. And I took a bold risk. I tried to look it up and I couldn't find it anywhere. And then I went to, I'm not going to say the site's name, but it involves a bay of some sort. And it was there with many people uploading it so that I could easily find it with subtitles in English. And the copy I had wasn't the greatest visually looking, but it was still pretty decent. And I just watched it in bed. Can you imagine? I watched this film in my bed just with a laptop on. And I was like, what the fuck am I seeing? And I was astonished. I was amazed. I was in awe of this film.
The next day when we met up and you told us about it.
I went to the university next day and told them, guys, I watched Lemonade Joe. It's amazingly insane. I've never seen a film like Lemonade Joe ever in my life.
You showed us two scenes. You showed us Hogo Fogo, when the scene's blue and like he shoots the guy with the wanted poster, and you showed us the corkscrew scene.
Yeah, so Bartek's history is I came in and showed them the scenes because when we were constructing our play, I gave out to every single person a Western of some sort. So Bartek had Paleface. I mentioned this in our Paleface review. Mm-hmm. One of my other friends, I gave them the Trinity movies. And this was the one I kept to me. I only showed everyone else two scenes because I knew if we watched this movie together, we would just want to take this movie and just put it on stage because it is amazing.
Yeah.
So I showed them two scenes. The one that Bartek mentioned of him in the bar, Hogo Fogo, and the sheriff comes in and he grabs the wanted poster and just keeps looking up and down, up and down, up and down at him. And the famous corkscrew scene at the very end, my brother, yet a monster, and then puts a corkscrew in. And I showed them those two scenes, and just from those two scenes, we just launched off. And then after, like pretty much nearly like 10 months later, we sat down and actually watched the film after we had finished our play. because I knew if we watched it, it would just influence us way too much. I just needed to be the voice of reason, go, no, we only need this, and let's move on. And over the years, Bartek and I have had movie nights in which we've just watched Lemonade Joe with a group of people, because this is a group of people type movie. Just seeing people react to the randomness that is Lemonade Joe.
Yep, and extending from that, we've watched 3 other Czechoslovakian films.
By the same director.
Same director, and they've all been interesting in different ways.
So yeah, it introduced me to this director whose name is something like Ulrich
Lipski, it looks like.
Ulrich Lipski, and his other movies are genre-bending masterpieces that are worth checking out. He has an adaptation of a Jules Verne book. He did a movie called 4 Murders Are Enough, Darling,
Yes.
which is amazing.
And Dinner for Adele, was it?
There's one that has multiple titles. It's called Dinner for Adele, or the most frequent title is Adele Hasn't Had Her Supper Yet, which is a monster movie where it's a killer plant that eats people.
It's like a detective mystery or something?
It's, if people are familiar with their mystery novels, it is a Nick Carter movie, which is the American Sherlock Holmes,
Right.
who was a real thing.
Isn't Nick Carter a Backstreet Boy?
I wish. Could you imagine? So that's my relationship with Lemonade Joe, and I've been wanting to do it on the pod all year, but due to COVID stuff happening, Bartek and I haven't been in the same room as each other, and I was like, no, we need to be in the same area to talk about Joe. And I knew I wanted some guests, and I kept flicking between who do I want, and I just kept saying, it's got to be the Contrarians. I think they're going to get something out of this. I don't know. They had an experience with Paleface, but boy, will they have an experience with Lemonade Joe. So tell us, guys, what were your thoughts and opinions and experience watching this movie?
So, first of all,
I remember.
I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, Alex, did we? No, I was trying to remember if when we did the Paleface, if we actually talked about our previous experience with westerns. Because I don't know, I don't even remember how much experience with westerns you have.
Yeah, we did talk about it briefly.
Yeah, we covered that. I just wanted to quickly call out that Nick Carter was a Backstreet Boy. I just wanted to make sure that was clear. I don't think it's the same Nick Carter we're talking about, but I just wanted to clarify that. Julio and I had kind of a couple back and forth texts about this. I don't know. I don't want to be too redundant, so I'm still kind of marinating on things. Julio, what were your takeaways from Lemonade Joe? Because I'm going to try to probably springboard off some of the things you mentioned, but I had a lot to take away from this. A lot of I was kind of shocked by this movie, honestly.
I wasn't shocked. I guess I'm kind of if it's a Ryan Sawinski recommendation, then I'm just kind of expecting anything could go. But I was I'm not confused. I think that I enjoyed the movie and I laughed a lot. And just kind of like to go back to a little bit to, I guess, what we talked about in the Paleface episode, Western is not my genre. So I was wondering, though, as I was watching it, if I was missing out on something because I was not... I'm not as, steeped in the Western genre as obviously the people that made this movie or the people that love this movie. But now, as we were talking and you were explaining the context of the movie, I realized that that's not what I was missing. What I was missing was the historical context of it, which I didn't look up because I was trying to kind of go into the movie completely blind. All I knew was the name, and that it was a musical Western. That's what you told me. So I didn't even know what year it was made, or what the plot was. So watching it, I was trying to figure out what it was trying to say about the Western genre, and but that's really not the point. The point is what it's trying to say about the situation in the Soviet Union at the time, which gives it an extra level that I didn't get while I was watching it, but I can definitely appreciate it now in retrospect. But even without that, it was funny. I was kind of, there's a part of me that was waiting to get just burned out on the gimmick, but it never happened, which was great. I was like, how much longer will this be funny? Just them aping an old Western and playing with the kind of like the tropes of we're gonna make it look like it's a really old movie and like it's a really bad transfer. We're gonna speed up some scenes, like it happens in like old movies, but it never got old, which is great. I mean, it's not a super long movie, but still, like it's like what, an hour 40, an hour 30, and so it stayed fresh. Like I said, I had a pretty good laughs. I was not crazy about the music. I think that might be one of those things that I don't know. It might be a translation problem, not necessarily the subtitles, but just I think I tend to enjoy music more if I can understand what they're saying as they're saying it. Then I think I enjoy songs a lot more than here, where I just kind of had to match the subtitles to the melody, and that was not as great. There are a couple of like musical numbers I like, but also as far as musicals go, I'm a bigger fan of characters just breaking into song for no reason, as opposed to characters justifying that they're singing. Like here, at least half the numbers are somebody actually performing at the bar. They'll sit at the piano and start playing the piano, and then they sing a song. To me, it's a little more fun when it's something like what the bad guy does later in the movie, where he's just for no reason starts singing.
Yes.
So I was mixed on the music. I'm sure you guys will tell me how I'm wrong, but overall I enjoyed it a lot. And kind of like Alex said, even though I was expecting a lot of outlandishness, I was still kind of blown away by just how out there this movie is.
So I think also this movie kind of hit me at the right time, because during my October, my month of like horror movies, as anyone knows, I tried to watch one every day. I discovered the movie Bone Tomahawk for the first time, which I'm not sure.
Amazing film.
Yes.
Amazing film.
Yeah. So that kind of, I was left kind of aghast for several days after watching that movie, and also the idea of kind of bending the idea of what westerns can be. And we have Blazing Saddles, we have these parodic western movies that are out there, and then when this was recommended, coming off Paleface, I kind of just I guess wrongly assumed it would be something in kind of a similar vein of a bygone era, and something that's kind of fun. And there's some things that maybe aged problematically, but it's still kind of this sterile, just kind of fun movie. And with this, it was like several times I was reading about the movie on my phone while the movie was going on, and this is 10 years before Blazing Saddles, and my sister watched this with me, and we kept thinking about, like, our dad was like only 10 years old when this came out. So to think about this movie that has comedic bits that are still like fresh today from a movie that's that old is pretty insane. A lot of the comedic bits in this movie were incredibly ahead of their time. This is like a lot of the comedic set pieces in this felt like Naked Gun stuff, or even at the earliest Caddyshack, something that would follow 16 17 years later after this. And then just like the absurdity of the ending, like the whole line of, I only got shot in the heart twice, like that whole sequence. And and the way it all comes together in the end when they're all related, but it's also just to sell more product. So there's the really fascinating aspect of it being written as like this rebellious punk rock type thing against, kind of the system that they were facing at the time, but also just in the sense of a film being made from an artistic standpoint with the different hues and colors throughout it is really fascinating. And then it's a satire on Westerns. And then, like I said, just some of the things that are played for jokes it is a style of comedy that's still just kind of being used today, like the ridiculousness of the shootout when their bullets are colliding with one another, and everywhere they go they can't catch each other. The one part where the guy who's running out with the telegram, he's running and he doesn't notice the horse is right in front of him until right up into the point where he gets there, and excuse me, and then goes around the horse. It's all this really like obvious comedy that's really popularized today. So kind of seeing all that and then realizing it's a movie from 50 years ago is or even longer than that at this point. It's fascinating, I think is the right word to describe it. And I think one of the more fascinating parts about it I read was the original audience for it in Czechoslovakia it kind of washed over them because they didn't have any exposure to Westerns at that point. So they didn't understand that this was like a parody of what they were watching. And it's, yeah, it's one of those movies that I had never heard of, never would have if we didn't do this project right here. But now it's going to be stuck in the back of my head for the next few weeks and me thinking about it. So I very much appreciate the opportunity to discuss it here.
Bartek, how is your experience with Lemonade Joe on this watch and over the years?
Yes, this is probably my fourth viewing, first time alone.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's still a lot of fun. I always enjoy, laughing about it, talking about it. And even kind of now, we're still kind of learning new things about it. Like Julio was talking about how he now understands the context and he can appreciate it in that light. We only really recently kind of looked into this. Like, I mean, it was mostly you, Ryan.
Yeah, into what Czechoslovakia's background was at the time of making it and also later on. And, like, I don't know anything about what happened with Czechoslovakia and how it's separated off into two different things, the Czech Republic. I didn't know any of that.
Yeah, not me neither, really, and considering my Polish family history. And you were talking about last week, Ryan, that people online, like Czech fans, obviously they consider it a classic. Most other people who've heard of it consider it a cult classic, but that they were surprised that people that weren't Czech enjoyed it because the film has a bunch of wordplay and stuff.
Yeah, apparently, according to YouTube comments, a lot of Czech people were very pleasantly surprised that English speakers and anyone who isn't Czech got something out of the movie, because apparently to them, this is a really funny movie wordplay-wise and the language-wise, and although we have subtitles, and subtitles are never going to be perfect, and the subtitles are going to obviously have some stuff lacking, and there are different variants of subtitles all around the place for this movie of people trying to make sense of it. But to me, one of the things that really touched upon it was just the spectrum of comedy that it does hit. Not just the language, but the filmmaking itself. Not just via physical comedy, but the way the shots are done, the cuts, the amount of time a shot will linger, the color palette of the movie, of course, the music, and just striking visuals such as when Joe falls off the cliff side and he's flying and his hat falls off and he puts it back on, all of that stuff. And I wrote to one of these people, no matter the language barrier, seeing an old man cry because someone just ate his fiddle will always be funny, no matter the language.
Yeah, and that's kind of the point I'm trying to make. Like, there's just a bunch of surface level things in this film that are funny and easy to enjoy. Hence, you said we watch this film with a group of people and we have a good time. Just, yeah, a lot of fun. And because Polish and Czech are very similar languages, I do kind of occasionally understand little bits of what is being said. But in general, when it comes to like musical stuff, I'm completely fine not understanding the lyrics.
Because you love Bollywood.
I love Bollywood. I don't speak Bollywoodese.
Yeah, Alex, I was going to ask, you're infamously not a fan of musicals. And from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're a little bit opposite of Julio, where from my understanding, you don't like it when people just break out into song. Is that correct?
So I have a complicated relationship with musicals, in that there's a difference to me of a musical like this and then a musical like Rent or Les Mis. I do not care for when dialogue is sung. I find that very just grating on the senses, because I have a hard time connecting to what's going on the screen. In this particular situation, I understand this is a musical, but it's like the musical numbers are almost interludes to explain where we're going. And so to answer, or to kind of go back to that, not to answer, but to go to the starting point, I didn't have really a problem with it in this movie, because the musical sets would either be to provide an interim in between these set pieces, or it would be something really just over the top and silly and fun, like I think it's the first time the color goes red in the movie when they're at the saloon and the women there are singing about how if my daddy drank whiskey he'd still be alive and kicking. And it's so things like that, it provides a certain air of silliness. And I also think a big part of it is just, truthfully, if a movie's like a big drama piece that's a musical, I have a really hard time getting emotionally invested into something dramatic that's a musical. But something like this, or I mean like the South Park movie, which is a musical, it just kind of, in these situations adds to the ridiculousness and the fun of it all.
Yeah, you raise a good point. This film doesn't. The music's in this. Jesus.
The music in the film.
The sing-songs in the film don't really have any sort of like back and forths between characters. It's always just the person singing or the people singing are the ones who sing the song.
And to kind of just go against Julio in some minor bits, I think practically all of the songs are just the character deciding that they're going to sing, and not in the way that like they just burst in singing. Like when Hogo Fogo has his song, the first one he has, it may seem like it's out of nowhere, but he does as an actor and as his character. His character's a magician, a performer, and before he does his little song, he does a little curtsy, like, and he goes like, sit down, and he's telling them, sit down so I can perform this to you right now. So even little touches like that kind of sow the seeds of the continuity and the understanding of how the music does come into this movie. It's not so much to me as every now and then they'll burst into song randomly. It does seem to me more frequently, if not mostly, that they will find an excuse as characters to start performing a song. Whether it be Joe sits at the piano and he's going to fuck with Hogo Fogo inside the piano because he tried to throw a knife at him and he did a Kurt Russell and threw it back. And stuff like that. Or Joe is just your typical singing cowboy and he's singing to himself happily as he's leaving the town because he's done his job.
Yeah.
And I think to go into the music side too, you get set up with how the music's going to be via the opening of the movie. The movie just opens with like his mouth coming on screen and yodeling, and you just know, and half English, and none of the English actually makes any sense.
I
and
forget about that every time I watch
and
a
it goes
film.
into some Czech and some Spanish or whatever. It's a mixture of all this stuff, and you get a tone set for the movie from the opening credits, and just how the music is in the opening credits. You get an understanding of, oh, the music's not going to be important. It's kind of window dressing in a way. It's just another flavor added to this stew.
Yeah, they use in the saloon song, I remember they use Mucho Gusto at one. I think it's in the chorus of the song they sing, and I remember laughing at that. Yeah, it's absurd. I was trying to remember like my favorite comedic moments in the movie and things that kind of don't take you out of it, but just serve to show how silly it is. When Hogo Fogo, Horace is posing as the blind man, and then he bumps into the woman, the damsel in the film, Winifred, and he's like, "Oh, a sofa," and she's like, "No, it's still just me." It's that there's so many points in the movie where as soon as you think it's going to take itself seriously or present some sort of dramatic narrative, there's a one-liner or something, or just a physical gag that just snaps you back to how silly it is.
But then, a thing I also like about this film too, from a filmmaking standpoint, it does genuinely have really sincere, really well done moments of tension and of suspense and of building atmosphere that you would see in a genuine Western. It's not all 110% silly, goofy spoof all the time. You have shots like when Joe enters the saloon, and it's played, even though it's all bright yellow and his outfit is absurd and all that, it's still played for the tension and the seriousness in the filmmaking. You don't have silly sound effects when he walks in. They know at the right moments when to just have a little bit of seriousness. One of my favorite shots, and I love it because this would be in a real Western. This came out the same year as A Fistful of Dollars. So you have the moment at the end where Hogo Fogo has a corkscrew in the back, and you have him grabbing out his gun, and the intense back and forth close-ups between him and Winifred you would see in a Sergio Leone movie. You would see in a genuine Western of that time. And that bit at the end is a moment where that's played straight in a way, but then they goof it up at the end with like his silly faces when he gets shot by Joe and the freeze frames, because it's also aping off the old silent movie era as well, with the tinted color and the speeding up, slow down, and all that stuff. So I also do appreciate with the film, the filmmaking itself really does try to ape off the Westerns in a sincere way as well as just a satirical way. Unlike, say, I love Blazing Saddles, but when I think of Blazing Saddles, it just looks like a comedy film. You know, like it looks gorgeous, like set design, costumes, the music, the acting, but like he shoots it like a Mel Brooks movie. You know, it's not as striking as, say, this movie visually is, and how this movie, film-wise, is superior because it is going for a very obvious comedy identity, but it also is building up the serious motifs and ideas that you see in an actual Western.
Dude, the sequence where he's singing where again Horace is posing as the blind man, and he's singing the song about his funeral to Winifred, where it like shows the postcard of New Orleans, but then the actors start marching in the background, and then it turns into like a big set. As Julio knows, and anyone that's spoken to me or has ever listened to our podcast knows, I adore physical sets, big set pieces and things like that, using real humans and real sound stages. So that whole sequence, to what you're saying, I was just completely enamored with what was going on, because it was funny, like the thing he was singing about, or the subject and like what was happening was funny, but what was being shown on screen was this real effort at genuine filmmaking. And even like the end with the rickshaw, not the rickshaw, but the carriage that pulls them away after they get married, and then the taper comes off below and billows down and says the end, and all the actors come out and kind of wave goodbye to him and everything like that. It's exactly what you're saying. It's not just your standard comedy that's set like a Western, quote unquote, but it's a movie that was made with diligent effort, but at the same time was really funny and satirical.
Yeah, but the joke's on you, Alex, because all that stuff's CGI.
Oh, is it?
I don't know.
Just to talk about the tinting of the movie, how did you guys feel about tinting? Because are you familiar? Have you watched many movies that have been tinted before? Because if you go back in older cinema, this is far more frequent. So how were you with that? Because just a backstory, I watched this with one of my sister's friends who has some color blindness issues, and this movie fucked with him royally, because it would just... Sometimes it would hard cut to a different color, and sometimes you would just notice that the scene went from green to yellow to blue, and you realized I didn't notice exactly the points when it changed. How was your experience with the visual look of the tint of the movie?
Well, Julio, we have experience with this because we did Natural Born Killers, and that movie goes to green anytime something significant happens. So I was trying to see if the tinting had any significance to what was going on, but I think it really
me too.
Yeah, I think it kind of just, the tinting was to play with the setting they were in, and I couldn't really, I don't know. Julio, have you seen a movie similar to this? I guess that was kind of the main thing for me, was watching this was like, oh, this is interesting. I'd never really seen this played with this much, but aside from that, to me, it was just kind of a novelty. Did you take anything else away from it?
No, to me, like my reaction to it, my association with this kind of stuff would be that there was something wrong with the negative. There was something wrong with the film. I was thinking of it from the projection standpoint of like, oh, the print got fucked up and now it's all messed up. So as far as movies and filmmakers doing it intentionally, this is probably, I mean, I wouldn't count Natural Born Killers, although that is true that they really go
I wasn't, just to be fair, I wasn't comparing Lemonade Joe with Natural Born Killers.
Yeah, but Joe's better. So
Oliver Stone's Lemonade Joe.
Yeah.
But no, I didn't, and much like you, Alex, I was trying to find a pattern to the color changes, just to see if that was a thing. But then after, I don't know, 10 minutes or so, I figured it wasn't. If it's there, it was beyond my understanding, at least on a first watch. So I mean, it was, I don't know that I think that you could color it, you could tone it down or completely get rid of it, and I don't know that it would really affect my enjoyment of the movie or enhance it even. But I don't know. I mean, if you are getting something out of it, I really want to hear about it, because to me, I mean, I did think maybe halfway through the movie, I was like, what if you actually shot this a lot more like a standard Western instead of an old-time Western? If you got rid of a lot of the stuff that's fun, but like the speeding up and the filters, and if you make it look less like an old movie and more like, I guess, a contemporary thing, something that you were shooting in the 60s. I was like, how much would it lose comedically. It was just something that I thought about, but it's not. I think it works fine as it is. But what do you get out of the tinting, Ryan?
Well, I'm far more familiar with it with old school cinema. Like a big classic movie that's tinted is The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which is a big, well-known German expressionist film. And if you even
Nosferatu is the one I know.
Nosferatu, and so I'm far more used to that from the 20s, especially in European cinema. There's another one called The Man Who Laughs, which is one of the inspiration points for the Joker. That's another one that plays around with colors. I think you would lose a significant amount of personality of the film if you remove the tinting, because it is going 110% for this old school Western. It's not trying to be the contemporary Western. It's trying to be these old school Westerns down to the characters themselves, where Hogo Fogo is not a character in a Western you would have seen in the contemporary. He's the ones you would have seen in the old school. He is the guy who would have tied her to the train tracks. And if you removed the speed up, slow down, the tinting, all that stuff, I think that would be lost. Also, the film's called Lemonade Joe, and lots of it is in lemonade yellow. And I'm sorry, but you need that. It's amazing. It's an amazing choice. And sometimes the tinting plays comedically as well. One of my favorite jokes, and this is just me, maybe different for you, but there's a scene in which Lemonade Joe is sitting on the ground behind a barrel when the bank's getting robbed, and he's with Winifred and her dad. And in the scene, his horse is laying down with him, but since his horse is white, throughout the scene, you kind of forget I forget that the horse is there, because he kind of just blends in with the bright yellow palette, and Joe's outfit is bright and in it. And then there comes a point where the barrel gets shot and water splurts on the horse's face, and it moves and it neighs, and he calms it down, and that always gets a laugh out of me, because for some reason my eyes became accustomed to it and forgot that there was a horse right there. And little moments like that would be lost. And just striking to me, there's just moments in not just comedy but just visually striking, such as Hogo Fogo's big villain song, the first one, the greens of that song, and like the hue and the weird imagery. You would lose a lot of personality and expression from that, because also his song is really referring back to that kind of expressionist era visually, like with the floating heads and the random still images of him, and the song itself sounds like something you would hear from those kind of old movies when sound was just coming in. And I think you would lose an essence of the weirdness as well. It's also very weird to look at that there's this bright yellow film in front of you, and then it will abruptly cut to red. Yeah,
but even with all that being said, like our subjective takes on it, apparently there is a sort of like cultural color association thing.
Yeah.
So there is like a meaning to the colors. Like the pinkish one is meant to be a bit more romantic. Stuff
yeah,
like that.
we have to take that into account. Like when you watch some Asian cinema, right? When you watch like a Bruce Lee movie, white and red have different meanings color-wise than what we have in the West, right?
Yeah.
And you have to try and take that in consideration in some minor way. But to me, I think there is a slight rhythm and meaning to when they change the colors up, but I'm too busy just enjoying the film to sit down and write down notes of what the meaning of the colors are in whichever scene to really care about it either.
Yeah, finding the pattern, like obviously the pink one's a bit more obvious, but like
and the yellow because
and the yellow, yeah.
Honor and Joe.
But then you have like the greens and the blues. Like I think the green ones might be the more villainous color.
Yeah, the more unsettling.
Like the two that I think of are obviously the Hogo Fogo first song, and when Joe's coming back to the bar for the second time. And like, Doug Badman is sending the smoke signals and they're looking at it. It's like maybe, villainous plotty kind of thing.
Yeah. So this time around, Bartek, there's many gags. We're going to talk about them. Many characters. What were some gags and characters that really, really hit for you on this watch? And what have been just some that have always hit for you? It's a lot. It's a lot to ask.
Yeah, you've already mentioned the violin.
The fiddle.
Yes. Fuck me, the fiddle. The famous, oh, fiddle, my fiddle.
Oh, my fiddle, my fiddle. And the guy's just eating his fiddle in front of his fucking face.
Yeah, and pretty much both the times, or all the times where, what's his name, Ezra Goodman?
Yes, Ezra Goodman.
Ezra Goodman, whenever he gets upset, they play like a cruel prank on him. Like, I always forget, like, obviously, they eat his fiddle, first of all, they shoot it. Then they eat it. Then he cries, and then they pull down his hat over his head.
Yeah.
And he just looks ridiculous, even though we were supposed to be sympathizing with him. And then later on, Hogofogo is basically telling him, like, yeah, I'm gonna rape your daughter. And obviously he's distraught, but then he, like, lights his coat on fire and makes him run away. And it's like, this film does a lot of very cruel things, but the tone of it just makes it all funny.
I think this film is tonally perfect. If that's its biggest strength to me, is the way it shifts between tones and comedic tones is perfect, because Hogofogo is the type of villain you would never get in a movie now, because he is so cartoonishly evil. Like, I love when Hogofogo comes in the first scene when he comes in, and he insults Tornado Lou, and he's like, apologize to that lady. Lady, I don't see any here. And it's just like that kind of thing. And then he does his magic tricks, and he swaps out pistols with rabbits, and he pulls a flower out, and he gives the flowers to Tornado Lou, and she throws them, and they explode, and she just screams and runs away in fear. And it's just like, you meet him, and that's the first thing he does, and you go, oh, this is the kind of character whose comedy is going to derive from what despicable thing is he going to do next. And one of my favorite lines in the movie is his brother, Doug Badman, let's not forget, Good Man and Bad Man are in this movie, says to him, like, he doesn't appreciate, he near the end, he's turning around and being like, Hogofogo, you're too much, we've got to leave Winifred alone, and, you know, she's innocent and pure, and he's like, purity and innocence, just tidbits for my lust, and he's just like eating a steak, and it's like that kind of character, that kind of comedy is set. So when you have something like they eat the old man's fiddle, it's kind of funny. And then when they pull his hat, you would see that in an old Western too. But then and again, this is in all Westerns, you always have the bad guy who wants the girl. And they don't just want her, they want her sexually, right? They want to violate the girl to fuck over the bad guy and whoever else. But you have that, like you said, he's saying it to the old man, the father of this woman, and then he lights the guy's coat on fire, and the guy runs away screaming in pain. And it's that kind of cartoony plane that the movie's on. So there's so many jokes and things that hit across. What about you, Julio? You said you got some laughs out of this. What were some notable moments or characters that gave you laughs?
I think the main guy, Hogofogo, is probably the biggest source of laugh, for me at least, the biggest source of laughter. So I have two really. One is when they're in the final confrontation, when they're playing poker.
Yes.
He's trying to find his hidden aces, and he keeps pulling stuff out of his pockets. And at some point he pulls out a rabbit, and Lemonade Joe is across from him, and he's just kind of nodding. And at some point he's like impressed by the fact that he pulled out a rabbit or whatever it is that he's pulling out. That is a moment where the speeding up the film works really well for me.
Yeah.
You know, because it starts at the regular speed, and then they speed it up the more stuff he pulls out of his jacket. So that was pretty funny. And then probably the biggest laugh I had was when they had captured Lemonade Joe, the bad guys, and they have him tied up, and they're talking about how they're gonna torture him, and it turns out that the torture is just them dirtying up his costume.
Because he's the pure white hero.
It works so well. I mean, you're talking about visually and the colors and everything, but here he's been so immaculate the entire movie, just dressed in white.
He even got a
always so
haircut.
clean.
He even got a haircut just before the scene happened, and he's like, "Ooh, I love my new haircut." And they put the oil and shit on his hair, and he's like,
Yep.
"Not my hair."
Yeah, from the moment that it starts, he just grabs the cigar, and then you think he's gonna burn him, and instead he burns a hole in his like handkerchief or whatever. It was just so good. The despair on Lemonade Joe as he's getting dirtied up, and the glee from the bad guys. That was a really, I didn't see it coming. It was a really good punchline. So I really like that.
What about you, Alex?
And just to kind of piggyback on something you were saying too about when Horace comes into, or Hogofogo, like, because there's no CGI, those were all like real magic tricks that were happening that they recorded or filmed, as it were. So I think that deserves its own recognition. The comedy, you know, ranged from, like I mentioned, the sofa joke, which again that's from a subtitle, so I don't know if that's really what was said, but that made me laugh. And Julio mentioned, it might have been before we were recording, the warm woolies line, which tickled me. as far as comedy goes, I enjoyed. There's the one sequence where the two brothers, Horace and what was his brother's name? Doug were arguing and Doug said, "You're no brother of mine." So it looked like Horace took Doug's whiskey glass and poured like poison in it or something. But then he ended up just drinking it. I guess it was cocaine or what have you, because it clearly gave him like a jolt. But the way it was set up is he takes it and he pours it in there and he mixes it and he puts it back to where his glass was originally. And then he just pulls it back and drinks it anyway, which that was good. And then honestly, my favorite joke was it has nothing to do with the story, but I think it was like one of literally the last shots of the movie when they're all, the happy ending when Winifred and Lemonade Joe are riding away, and it's the townspeople all waving goodbye to him, and then it's like these two people above it might have been like the local, pharmacy or whatever, but one of them's the barber, and the guy that's waving, he goes over and he starts cutting his hair, and he like shoos him away. Like I'm telling you, that's a joke from like a movie today. And so seeing that here, I laughed so hard as the movie was going to the credits just from that one shot. It's such a throwaway joke, but God, it killed me.
There's many jokes. There's just jokes upon jokes upon jokes that you'll see pop up again. Like what I like about this is when you say this is a silly farce, satirical, whimsical, whatever. Some people might say, because you're saying it's a comedy, might say, oh well. They expect that not a lot of effort is put in the way that a drama is. This film is filled with little details that just, if you notice them, you can build stuff for yourself, such as I noticed on this watching, Doug Badman, when Lemonade Joe is in there and he shoots the fly, which is amazing, he's tapping his fingers on the table. Like, that's his like, response, like tap, 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 tap. When we first meet Hogo Fogo, he's tapping his fingers the exact same way on the carriage of the door, on the door's carriage when he's, riding in, and it's the exact same, and that's giving you the little tip. Oh yeah, they're related, and then little things like that keep popping up. Like Hogo Fogo and Lemonade Joe are as perfect as one another because they're brothers. So their bullets will just hit each other. They think the exact same because they're brothers. This is that kind of movie where it operates on that logic as well, and it's these little details like that. Like, I like the joke or statement that Lemonade Joe wears his holsters surprisingly low. I just like it because it adds a mystique to his character of, he already has this absurd outfit. We don't know why he is here yet. And then they're like, and he wears his holsters low. And you're like, why does he do that? Ooh, it must be intimidating. And then you see, like, he actually shows off and he actually has some gun skills, and it's these little details like that I really appreciate. And Hogo Fogo is a magician, and it's not just like a throwaway thing. It is a constant thing throughout the movie that he is a magician, he's a trickster, he is a guy who loves wearing disguises, and it is constantly throughout the movie. It's not just one scene like, oh, he does a thing and it's a throwaway. And they keep building upon it, not with just jokes, but just little layers of his character. Just, of course this despicable guy's a magician. Of course he is.
Yeah, he can teleport a lot.
He can teleport. One of Bartek's favorite moments is the graveyard scene with Winifred and Hogo Fogo. Do you want to talk about that briefly, Bartek?
Which one?
The first one. The one where they rattle off what kind of animals they are to one another.
I just love the line, enough zoology. But even before that, like, she's very tenderly attending to that gravestone, and then
her mother's grave,
and then even though Hogo Fogo would be in view range of her, he just pops up behind her. And even then, when we're talking about Lemonade Joe and Hogo Fogo being an even level, that was their first interaction, and it was in a sped up, completely wacky like fight where Joe is just spinning him around, and
he's a dummy, and he hangs him upside down and shakes all of the shit out of his pockets, all of it.
And most of it was stuff that he just won in poker.
And that's it. There you go, another little detail. Most of it was just the stuff he just won in the poker game before that scene. Mm-hmm. In another comedy, they wouldn't have had that detail there. They would have just had it's just rabbits and cards and whatever.
No, yeah, that's the gag for the poker game later in the film.
Oh, yeah. I love the poker game with him and Joe calls him something like a cabbage head or something really weird.
Oh yeah, I think he just calls him like salad.
Yeah, and he calls him something weird, and I love the fact that Hogo Fogo, throughout the whole entire movie, he does something that most of these villains don't in movies, which is when he sees Joe, he just fucking shoots him as much as he can. Like, when he pops up and he meets, like, when he encounters Joe the first time, Joe's at the piano and he's singing some bullshit song about how great he is, and Hogo Fogo comes out, and one of my favorite shots is Joe at the piano, and Hogo Fogo just shoots him in the fucking head, and Joe just falls down, and then he gets back up. And it gives you this tone of, oh, death means nothing in this universe. So then at the end of the movie, when Joe just comes in with like a little sling over his arm.
I also love the phrase clinical death.
Oh, yes. Lemonade cures clinical death.
That was that scene you mentioned where he shoots him in the head, though. That was the biggest like parental advisory logo on this movie from Amazon, was because that's the scene with blackface. It was like, warning, this scene, yeah, which obviously, you know, as we talked about with the pale face, by definition of the name, there's some problematic natures of this, but like when I pulled it up, I didn't know what I was getting into, like I said, so like the first warning Amazon gave me was blackface. But one of the things...
Oh, so you had a warning, because I didn't watch it on Amazon, so to me, it came out of nowhere.
It
came out of
took
nowhere
you
for
by
me.
surprise.
Same.
I honestly, I had to like pause and make sure that's what it was, because I thought maybe it's just a different character wearing a mask or something, but no, it's actually like 100% blackface.
Yeah. But
I was gonna say, just kind of piggybacking on what y'all were talking about, the comedy, also Doug's ability to blow letters and numbers and smoke from his cigars was also fantastic.
Yeah. It's just the cartoony logic of the movie, like when Joe falls off the cliffside and he's just flying down for ages, and then he just lands perfectly like nothing happens. It's straight out of the Looney Tunes handbook of things, right? Like, all they needed to do was have the bit where the person's still running in midair, and then they realize that they're in midair and look down, and that's when they fall down. Like, that's the only thing they needed to add to really go there.
Yeah, add Wile E. Coyote instead of Coyote Kid.
Yeah, instead of Coyote Kid and the Pancho, what was his name?
Kid.
Oh, Pancho Kid as well.
Pancho Kid.
That was one of my favorite retorts, which was when Old Pistol's showing off his Mexican bandits, and Joe says, like, I don't care about your kids.
Joe at the end, when he learns that Tornado Lou and Doug and Horace are his siblings because they all have the same birthmark. It got a good laugh from me when he grabs Winifred's arms and looks up and down them, and then he doesn't see a birthmark, so he just, like, I think he even puts his hand on his stomach to show that he's taking like a sigh of relief. It's fantastic.
Yeah, this film's got a lot going on.
So how brutal, to me, maybe the highlight of the movie is the most brutal scene that was not, at least I didn't feel it was funny, but I felt it was like, I don't know, like the movie, I don't know, because like I said, I was waiting for a critique of the Western as a genre, and to me, that happened when Lou saves when she saves Joe twice,
Yeah.
and then he treats her. She's basically professing her love, and he treats her like a whore, and he ends up giving her a check for $5, and she is obviously just crushed by that response. But you never get a moment where he realizes he was in the wrong. He's just a complete asshole, and then he leaves.
Because
to
that's
me, that
what
was
these
great because it
cowboys
was
are like
just-
in the Westerns. They're always like
Right.
infallible, perfect heroes, even if they're murderous, drunken assholes.
Well, no, this is different because he's the law.
Well, what serves Cola Loca serves the law. Like, that's the kind of character he is. Like, Lemonade Joe's the villain of the fucking movie, really. Like, he's a horrible arsehole, and that scene shows it. But even before that, you had evidence that Joe was a prick. Even before then, like, when he first meets Tornado Lou and he looks up and down, he's like, I don't want to interact with you. I want to interact with the blonde lady, you know, even though this woman just saved his life.
Yeah, the pure virginal one.
But yeah, that scene is, as Bartek said, cruel. But is it too much? Is it too much? I don't think so, because I think it makes me laugh of how an asshole much of an oblivious arsehole he is, and then he ends the scene by leaving by going back up the chimney he came down.
And saying adios.
That was great. Yeah. And then Lou ends the scene because she's like on the floor saying, "I hate you," and then she goes to like show her distress by wiping her face, so she just covers her face in soot. It's fantastic.
It's amazing. But is it too mean-spirited? Is he too much? I don't think so. Bartek, you've seen the movie a few more times than everyone else here, so what do you think?
Well, you've seen it one more than I have.
I guess, but what do you think?
Is it too cruel? I think I'm with you. It's the comedy of the thing, and this is before he turns into the Avenger version where he's wearing black.
Is that before or after Winifred finds out that he's actually not an agent of the law, but an agent of the lemonade?
Well, that's really early on.
Because
Yeah,
even
in the
in
graveyard.
that scene, Joe immediately knows that she knows, which is amazing. But his thing was, all right, how much percentage do you want in the profits?
He's all about the money.
And that's who Joe is. Joe is the guy who gives the woman who saved his life a percentage of money. That's who he is. He's a fucking asshole. He's a monster.
But even though he is this, capitalist pig dog, as we like to call him,
yes.
He still kind of has the protagonist powers convention. Like, he's still always shown in a glorified light. He can survive, brutal things like 2 gunshots through the heart and tar.
Yeah.
And he is this kind of infallible figure that, like, if you forget the whole thing about how he's really just, a salesman, you kind of remember him as being like, oh yeah, he's just this like messianic figure who...
Because they play up on the conventions of not just a Western, but the general thing of
exactly.
He is the guy all in white. He's got the perfect hair, the perfect teeth. He sings perfectly. All the women love him. He's this infallible guy. But the movie constantly is saying, no, he's not. But you can't help but be conditioned by movies you've seen to go, but he is. He's Lemonade Joe, the hero of the movie. But no, he's not. He's evil. He's not evil, but like he's definitely a corrupt figure. And as you know, Alex, you said you're reading stuff about the movie while watching, and like we've said about the background of the movie, Joe is a very critical critique on these cowboys from the westerns of America by 110%. On the Wikipedia, they even mention that the writer brings this up of he really hates the hypocrisy of the heroes of westerns because they're always like right and perfect and they never really learn a lesson, even though they're like murderers and alcoholics and sometimes rapists and all these terrible things. Yet John Wayne played them, so it's fine.
Oh yeah, exactly. He's the Duke, so it's okay. It's also like the whole idea of like I was gonna say self-imposed, but that's not even it. The forced Superman type thing.
Yeah.
Like here's the hero. Just take it. And
history's written by the winners, and he wins in this film.
Yeah, they get the Beverly Hillbillies ending where they stick the thing in the ground and oil spews out.
Just
the
adding
ending
like,
of this
we
movie,
win.
yeah, the ending of this movie is just utterly preposterous. I love it. It's one of those like it kind of eradicates the entire movie within a 45-second span, but it's so silly that it makes it worthwhile.
Yeah, it reminds me of if any of you've seen Kentucky Fried Movie. The longest segment in that is the Fistful of Yen one, and at the very end it's revealed that like, oh, this was a commercial all along.
Yeah. Well, it works though, right? The ending being as absurd as it is because one, they leave it to the end. But, and so you have to have the maximum amount of absurdity. So they leave it to the end. They don't shoot their load all over the place in the first 10 minutes, and then you're left with subpar absurdism. They keep amping up the stakes, but as stated, it's these little details. Like, we've seen Joe get shot in the fucking head earlier. He falls off a cliff and he's fine. So when he rocks up at the end and he's got just a little sling over his arm and smoke is still billowing out of his chest from having been shot, even though he's walked all this way, you're like, of course. And then the extra touch of the lemonade did it. The lemonade, the thing that the movie is titled after, and the thing that he's been selling is the thing that saved him, and it cures clinical death. And when the visual image of the old man, who we've never seen before,
his dad,
the head of the company, spraying the water like it's holy water
Yes.
on all of their
Like
bodies.
the priest blessing.
Like a priest giving a blessing, and the way that they all jilt back up, like just so cartoony, their bodies go all stiff, and they like the sound effects that they have, and
this film loves the jump cuts.
well, yeah, jump cuts. I mean, if Lawrence of Arabia can have a jump cut, so can this movie. But yeah,
I was wondering if that guy, the guy that plays the dad, if he was a known actor, because that seemed like a role, like a moment where you would throw in a cameo from, from John Wayne or from somebody. Obviously, in this case, because it's a Czech movie, then you would have to, I don't know, you wouldn't bring a Western star, but you would bring somebody that I guess would make it even funnier just by on a meta context. I got that feeling, at least.
I don't know if that's the case. I haven't looked. He's the one actor I never looked up. I looked up pretty much everyone else, but he's the one I didn't bother. But the main big star of the movie is Hogo Fogo. From my understanding, he starred in very big movies. Like, if you know your films, he is in the most beloved version of Baron Munchausen, which Terry Gilliam tried to adapt the Czech version of Baron Munchausen to much failure, and his version's terrible. But he plays Munchausen, the Hogo Fogo, so he, to me, from my understanding, he's the big star of the movie, and the voice of Lemonade Joe when he sings. That's the other big star. Like, that guy's called the Golden Voice. He's like one of the most beloved singers of all of Czech.
Yeah. In the other Czechoslovakian films we've watched, I think in 3 of the 4 that we've seen, I think.
Yeah, Hogo Fogo's been in them.
The Milos Kopecki, I think his name is. He's been in all of them, and he's always been
a villain.
He's always been very entertaining.
Him and Joe are the best, like, my favorite performances in the movie. Like,
oh, for sure.
We've talked about Hogo Fogo. I mean, he's great, but Joe is so perfect. Like, him yodeling, the close up on his mouth as he sings, and that dumbass expression he has on his face throughout the whole movie of this air of I'm important, but I don't know a single thing that's going on, is communicated perfectly by just this actor.
And just like his sincere reaction, was like, oh no, I don't drink spirits.
Oh,
I don't touch spirits.
What did you guys think of Joe's kryptonite?
It was set up.
That was a good twist. I was 100% sure that he was not gonna fall for it the second time, and he did.
And the way his body just fully like goes stiff as a board and just collapses over.
Oh, speaking of stiff bodies, man, Hogo Fogo.
Oh, one of the best visual gags is when Hogo Fogo is like frozen in terror. I can't remember.
Well, there are two that I'm thinking of. The first one is right after his first villainous song, where he's about to shoot Joe after finishing singing about how he loves being evil.
Yes,
and then just smash, and he's just like passed out.
But he's standing up, holding in the guns, and the camera moves away so that they have a conversation. And the camera quickly moves back, and Doug Badman's like, okay, I'm gonna leave the scene now, and he just grabs him and tucks him underneath his arm and walks away. Like, it's obviously a dummy, but because of the tinting there, you don't notice it's a dummy until he does the thing and leaves with his brother underneath his arm. That was an amazing gag.
But then the one that you were just gonna bring up is when he thinks that he's killed Joe, and Joe just appears and he's frozen, and it's. And it's reference, like, Joe's, like, amazing. He's still as a stone.
Yeah, he's got a pulse and all of that. And then when he calls, when he speaks, is like, you bastard or something. He's like, a warm human word, finally. Alex, I want to point out, I'm surprised I haven't heard. I thought one of your favorite gags would be, there's the bit where Hogo Fogo's pretending to be the blind old man, and he's waiting for Winifred to help him cross the road, but instead...
This is one of my favorite gags.
Instead, a small girl runs over to help him, and he then screams at them and calls them a bastard.
Little bastard.
You little bastard, and chases them away.
Apparently, in another translation, he's like, Herod should have gotten you, or something.
That whole... him being the blind man, and then... also the payoff of that comedically when he's sneaking her out and he's just Hogo Fogo, and Joe comes up behind him. He's like, wait a minute. And then you just see him rolling the bill of his hat up, but he turns around and he's a completely different person. That shit's hilarious.
I love the fact that he's such an asshole that he writes he has a full letter prepared to stick on his back to say, "I just outdone you. Go fuck yourself."
And he even
basically.
mentions himself by the character, like Dr. Quartz, aka Hogofogo.
aka Hogofogo. I mean, there's just so much in the movie, comedic beats, set pieces, but I'm really glad that you guys got something out of the film, because I was saying to my wife, I was like, I think they're going to hate the movie. I don't know why. I just had a suspicion, because
You
I'm like,
told me this
Alex
too.
hates
Oh, no.
musicals, and I think he wouldn't like any of the music in this. And I know Julio isn't a fan of Westerns, so I'm like, I don't know if he's going to get anything out of this. But then I was like, but the film is just so fucking weird that it might
yeah.
just skate by. And-
Also, Alex likes Grease, so there are musicals that he likes.
Yeah, Grease rules.
No, Grease too.
One thing I did find in my research that I found particularly tickling was in the 80s when Gorbachev
Yes.
was trying to limit the Soviet alcohol, basically limit their intake and consumption. Basically, I guess the newspapers and stuff started calling him Lemonade Joe, which is fucking hilarious.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
We should bring that back as an insult to people.
No, we should call them salad.
Yeah, salad or cabbage head, depending which one you have. There's a lot going on. We lost Joe this year. The actor who played Lemonade Joe passed away only a couple of months ago. He was in his in his mid to late 90s. So that was another motivator to do this film, because one of the takeaways was, surprisingly, a lot of the cast members are still around, or were still around when I found this movie. Like Tornado Lou only passed away a couple years ago herself, and I'm pretty sure Winifred's still around, and all of these people were still kind of around. And for a present, my wife had got me, and we have it here in the room, a signed picture of Lemonade Joe from the actor.
Yeah, Carlo
Oh,
Fiala.
wow.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's sitting right here. It's a picture in black and white, which is my only issue. I'm like, if it was bright yellow, baby, but
Yeah, when I came here, I was like, oh, I don't see the autograph anywhere. And then it was here in the recording room.
we need Joe to look at us sternly and lovingly. But I'm really glad that you guys got an experience out of this, and who knows, maybe it will interest you to explore some other Czech films like it did for me, because there's a whole world out there of these films, and this director in particular, his works are very, very good and very interesting. There's another one of his films that I haven't checked out, but it's on my watch list. It's on YouTube, called Happy End, in which the whole entire film is in reverse. So the film starts off with the main character getting executed. So the credits are over his decapitated head, and then it rolls back onto his body, and you see how he got to this point. And so it's a movie where the ending is happy because it's the start of what the terrible story was.
So it's the Czech Irreversible. basically.
Damn it, Julio! Yeah, I was about to say, is Monica Bellucci in it? I was gonna make that joke.
But no, the main character is the bartender from Lemonade Joe, the guy who just
Okay.
switches bars no matter what. My favorite song in the movie, and I would be remiss if I did not mention it, is Winifred's song about Arizona. A little ditty about Arizona. And she's got like no care in the world. She's got no like a single thought in her head. And I like the commentary that's going on in that song of before, when they were free and had beer and whiskey and whatever they wanted to drink, they wouldn't kill one another because they were just too drunk and happy and dumb. But then once they're given this lemonade and they're all straight shooters, everyone just fucking dies all the time now, horribly, and they treat it like perfect. Everything's working out the way it should.
She's singing about how men are like gentlemen and gentle to women and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
and the image of her singing that are people fighting one another, but in glorious slow motion.
And of course, the last two words, Ryan.
Instead of bang bang or bing bang or whatever, it's
Pimp pump.
pimp pumph, and I love that. I don't know what that is in Czech. I hope it's just that. That's the words that they use instead of bang bang or whatever. But I just love her innocence, and she's just like, at the end of this song, she just points to the camera with both fingers and goes piff puff. Just it ends. I don't know. Like, I agree, the songs aren't the most brilliant thing in the world to me. Like, none of them are particularly catchy. I can take or leave not knowing the lyrics, but I do like that one. I listen to that one, and I love the opening song. Just the absurdity of it, and you're trying to make sense of what he's
like
saying.
The multilingual gibberish.
Multilingual gibberish, and he's singing like, "Too far
It's
have
like
you I made."
Yeah,
And
the
it's like,
song's
what's he
called.
saying?
Yeah, the song's called like "So Far
To
to You I May" or something.
Yeah, and it's just utter nonsense. But yeah, Lemonade Joe, a big film. It has a big legacy for people from the Czech Republic and from people from Europe. A lot of people apparently saw this on German television growing up. It's made a ripple, and I'm glad that it's surprisingly easy to find now, and that they have the film available for people who don't speak the language to see it, because it is different, it is striking, and as we've said many times, it does leave an impression, and it's well ahead of its time. And you'll never see a movie like Lemonade Joe, and that is something to behold in itself. In a world now where we're used to every film just being a redo of another film and everything like this, and this film is obviously taking stuff from old westerns. It's still taking something, but it is reinventing it and pushing it to a different degree. And you can add this in your comedy western pile now, and it will be the only one like it.
Yeah.
I've tried.
Well, you could remake Lemonade Joe today, and the twist would be that they would just play it straight.
No, the twist would be
Chris Pratt would play Lemonade
No,
Joe.
the twist would be Chris Lilly would play every single character and wear different colors of skin and still get a Netflix deal out of it. Yeah.
I actually, that's funny you bring that up. Me and my sister just recently revisited Angry Boys.
Yeah.
And as
Yeesh.
Wildly incorrect as it is, it's still, there's some comedy to be had with that.
Yeah, we only touched upon briefly, but yes, this film, the biggest negative of it is inexplicable blackface. The thing that, and there's no way to say this without coming across as like weird, but like when you say that there's a film with blackface in it, you have certain expectations of what's going to be transpiring in the thing, and they don't do any of it. It's just he comes out in blackface and just shoots Joe, and they just have a shootout, and that's it. They don't do the typical things that you would expect from something like this, or these older movies when you say, oh, there's going to be blackface. You're thinking, oh, he's going to do like a full-on song in blackface. So, like, he's dressed as a minstrel. His character is still doing that.
Well, he plays the trumpet, right?
He plays the trumpet, and that's about it. That's the only thing he does.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was. I mean, I thought it was just so that he could play the trumpet, and then he just, kept the blackface for the rest of the sequence. But honestly, I couldn't tell if it was meant to be a commentary on blackface, on the use of blackface, or if it was just, fuck it, let's use blackface because, he's going to play the trumpet.
Yeah.
I think it's funny, though, that it raised your expectations and then it didn't deliver when it came to how offensive the blackface was going to be.
And as bad as this is, in the context of the film, it doesn't make sense, yet it does, because the character they chose to do the blackface is the character you would choose to do it, because they are the villain with no redeeming qualities who will go into any disguise to do despicable things. Like, he does blackface, sure, but the most horrid things he does in this movie is try to sexually assault one girl and wants to fuck her, and he goes out of his way to do so. And he dresses up like a blind old man to grope her. Like, there's all this kind of stuff, and he hates children, and like it.
Yeah, for us, the blackface is like, a huge taboo that you don't touch. For him, it's just another disguise.
For him, it's just another disguise. It's just another means to an end. Well, and I appreciate in that regard that they chose that character, because I'm used to all these older movies, and let's not forget, not even old movies, like still currently, this year sparked a great conversation about racism and blackface and all this stuff, and what you do with these movies. Do you get rid of them? Do you erase them? Do you put a warning? What do you do? Chris Lilly, is he an evil monster? All this kind of stuff is still prevalent today, and I was thankful in a way that it wasn't our hero, Lemonade Joe, which I'm so used to in these movies, like Trading Places, a film that actually discusses racism, still has Dan Aykroyd in blackface for a whole fucking scene for no real reason. So
Bugs Bunny too, yeah.
As much as I don't like it, I do at least note the fact that they chose the villain character to do it, and it just adds on top of the layer of this character is despicable and does despicable things.
And also the other person who does, drop the slur, has the last name Badman.
Yes, people who are like, well, get out of here. For whites only, it's still a guy called Badman.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to touch upon with Lemonade Joe, Bartek?
Oh, this is just a film we could gush about forever.
It is amazingly dumb and silly and smart and intelligent. It's all over the shop in terms of what it's trying to do. I mean, we keep saying it, but the end is just fucking absurd and amazing. It just keeps stacking on top of each other. And we have to say the corkscrew scene is one of the most brilliant pieces of comedy ever put to screen. He puts the corkscrew in his back and then screws it in. And I just love that Hogo Fogo replies like, corkscrew, or another translation, you screwed up. And not only does he fall down, if you watch it, he spirals down to the ground.
Oh yeah, it's great. And the way they come back to life is just basically reverse shots of them dying. It's fantastic.
Yeah, this isn't a film where you're meant to get pissed off at the Deus Ex Machina of like, oh no, they're alive. It's if you really want it to be a real film, stop watching when they die. But really, it's just for fun.
If you wanted to be a real film, you wouldn't be watching Lemonade Show in that way, because the film fucking opens with ludicrous straight off the bat. A guy eats a fucking glass as like it's just a snack.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, you remember he eats the fiddle, but then there's other things he eats: the glass, the cane.
The cane, yeah.
I'm just thinking of a million things like gushing about, like, oh, I love this bit, I love that bit, but not really discussion. Like the phooey. Did you just say phooey?
He said phooey about lemonade. This man's a lunatic. Get him out of here.
And we already mentioned the jump cuts, like when Ezra is really sad that his daughter is going to be, sexually assaulted. Then she appears and it's like, my daughter, jump cut to him. Joe, jump cut to him.
I do love the visual gag of she's thinking at the grave of her mother, thinking about her future with Joe, and just a little image of the two of them together over the gravestone.
Yeah, where you normally have a picture of the deceased.
Just the absurdity of that. But yeah, this is a film where lots of crazy stuff. I mean, the ending with the corkscrew, it's my thing that I think about with Lemonade Joe. Just the absurdity of it. Just the fact that he spirals down to the ground. It's not like he just falls. He has to spiral because he got corkscrewed. And that's amazingly stupid and wonderful. And I adore it to bits. And
your tornadoing days are over.
Your tornadoing days are over, Julio.
Tornado Julio.
She was probably my favorite. No, I wouldn't say she was my favorite character. She was definitely not the funniest. But when she got shot, I was actually bummed. So I was thrilled that everybody came back to life like 5 minutes later.
Did you like how
it was?
I was gonna say, did you like how earlier in the movie she wore her little cosplay of Lemonade Joe? She had her own little Lemonade Joe outfit when they were gonna kill him.
I think I just like that she had. It's not that she had an arc, but she felt like somebody that had real emotions, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe because she's the most relatable because she was in love with somebody that treated her badly, and she had a reaction to that, and then she changed her mind again. It was, I don't know, I was engaged. Everybody was funny, but I was engaged with her emotionally. So that was I guess that's what stands out for me overall, in addition to everything that we've been talking about, all the funny stuff. I think that there was this character that was I guess stood out because of how, that cruel scene that we were talking about. That's the moment that I kind of set up and was like, oh, this is something completely different from what we've been seeing so far. So that was
in a scene that began
cool.
with blackface.
Yeah, in a scene that began with blackface. I agree. She stands out because she's one that would be in a serious Western, and that would be a plot line. And she doesn't get a lot of comedy moments either. Like, she has funny stuff that she says, and her relationship with Doug Badman is great. And just the fact that they are brother and sister, and they never touch that at the end. They're just like, hey, we're all related, happy-go-lucky. They had the Luke and Leia moment where they kissed briefly, and it's like, oh, whoopsie.
Yeah, she's also got like that satirical gag of like, no matter what her motivation is or like her current feelings, it always comes back to like, oh, but he's so dreamy.
Yeah, he's always so dreamy. And you're right, she stands out because she's far more straight-laced in comparison to everyone else. And
her motive is like reinforced throughout the film. Like, she always wants to be a better woman, and
she wants to be
constantly reinforced.
A better person, but everyone sees her as this whore, which they never actually demonstrate that she's ever actually a whore, because every time we see her, she does not take the advances of men.
Yeah, it's like, no, you are not the man who will change me.
Alex, some wrap-up thoughts and things you want to touch upon before we end this?
Just kind of what I said earlier. It's a movie that I was not expecting. Paleface, what we did with y'all previously was definitely a movie that once I read, the players involved and the time frame, I kind of knew what to expect, and I still enjoyed it, and I thought it was a good time. With this, I kind of just expected something a little bit similar, just of a different nationality, and what I got was, like I said, it was something that is a style of comedy that is still pretty prevalent today and predates some of the things that are attributed as like the originators by 10 years, and like we were talking about Blazing Saddles and things like that earlier. So while I was not familiar with any of the players involved, what I got was completely surprising and something pretty fantastic in terms of just blowing me away. So my recommendation would be, if anyone's listening to this and hasn't seen Lemonade Joe, hop on Amazon Prime, because I understand Ryan had mentioned the transfer earlier. I can attest that it is a fantastic transfer. Okay. There's some scratches in there, and you see all the cigarette burns, but the actual picture itself is fantastic. The subtitles are pretty up to snuff, so I recommend that. And glad we agreed to do this, just because I discovered, like I said earlier, I discovered this area and covered this blind spot. I greatly enjoyed this, so I guess thank you for having us.
No problem. Listening people, make sure to check out the Contrarians Podcast. We'll link their stuff in the description of this, and you guys always pumping out some interesting movies and discussions of them, and who knows what they're gonna hit us up with next. There's damned old Contrarians. Dinner for Adele, maybe the other Lipsky movie, that's the Killer Plant movie. Where the villain is still Hogo Fogo, but he's an old man in that. And I don't want to ruin anything too much, but in Dinner for Adele, or Adele hasn't had her supper yet, Ezra Goodman is in the movie too, and he still has his big beard, and his daughter tucks him into bed, and she puts a specially made pillow underneath his beard, so that his beard also has some comfort while he sleeps.
See, that sounds hilarious, but we just very recently had an experience with a movie that was so out there, so just weird, that it was really hard to actually argue against it, because it was just so, it didn't take itself seriously. If we had to do an episode, like, say, on Unlimited Joe, I know we could do it, but it would be a lot of work, because it's hard to make fun of something that's just not taking itself seriously.
And it's staying true to its own vision as well. Like, there are movies like this, and like you said, the movie you covered recently, and say David Lynch movies, you can pick his thing apart too, but like, they're staying true to their mission statement, their vision, and the integrity. And that's the thing. Like, it's weird to think that Lemonade Joe has a mission statement and integrity, but it does. As a film, it does. Yeah. And I find it great that a silly film like this, I'll watch a film like this and go, this film has lots of film integrity. This has lots of layers. And then when we'll talk about The Dark Knight Rises, I'm like, I think Christopher Nolan doesn't give a fuck, and he just made this for nothing.
And it's a film we discovered because you made up a running joke.
And it's just weird to think that a silly film like this, I has some merits to it, because it does feel like it's staying true to its vision. While sometimes even bigger filmmakers that are auteurs, you can still walk away going, I don't know. I think that was kind of not up to snuff type of deal. But again, I'm very thrilled that you guys all enjoyed it, and I hope you listening people out there have enjoyed the film and or seen it. And if not, and you still listen to this, there's still so much we haven't even touched upon, story elements we just didn't even touch, because the film is it's jam-packed. It's full of it, and you can see why this is a touchstone for people as a film. You can see why this is a film that many people, it's a beloved film. And hopefully over the years, it will be one of those weird little foreign films that gets seen a little bit more from us English speakers, and kind of gains a little bit more of a cult classic.
Yeah, wait for the South Korean remake.
Yeah, wait for the Spike Lee remake of it, in which he completely forgets the point of the fucking movie, and it's like his version of Old Boy.
I like the Old Boy, the Spike Lee's Old Boy.
It's okay to be wrong.
More than the original Old Boy.
It's okay.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
That's
just here's Spike Lee's Old Boy, right? Here it is. In the original Old Boy, the guy, the main character in the beginning, he's a drunk, and you see it because he's drinking and he's acting like a drunk, and you see it visually. In the Spike Lee Old Boy, Josh Brolin's running around in the street and he literally screams, "I'm so drunk right now." So I can't wait for the Lemonade Oh, no. The Oliver Stone version would lead heavier into the politics of this movie and just make it so on the nose obvious. Because I guess, really, before we properly wrap up, what did you think the political statements that this movie was making is? Like, do you think that this is a film that is strongly leaning towards communism, or is it in the interim of being very anti-communism and capitalism? Like, what do you think? Because even on the Wikipedia page, they even mention many film theorists and anthropologists and all this kind of stuff still debate over what the film is actually sniping at and what its stance as a film is, because still, we gotta remember, this was made in a country that was under the rule of the USSR at the time. What do you think, Bartek? You've seen this several times. We always joke and laugh about how this is funny because it's Soviet Western, but we rarely ever talk about what we think the political or like the ideology it's leaning towards is.
Yeah, I can definitely believe that people are debating over it, because I always just think of like it's a film that's trying to be funny and maybe it doesn't want to take a stance so that it can explore all facets. But yeah, like you say, it's made in a communist country where the hero is being depicted as a capitalist, but he's also subtextually a bad guy.
Yeah, and they critique and they comment and critique and look at him very critically for his capitalistic ideals.
Yeah, I almost want to say that they just wanted to take a neutral stance and make fun of both sides, I guess.
What do you guys think?
See, when I was watching it, like I said, not having any of the cultural context, I was trying to read it as a critique of the Western genre and by extension just American culture. So I would have to rewatch it to give you like a more thought out analysis of what I think it says on a bigger canvas as far as the actual like about communism and the Soviet Union. But as reading it as just a Czech filmmaker giving us his version of what could be called the ultimate American genre, I think it's pretty fascinating, if not extremely focused, because I mentioned it earlier. I couldn't really figure out what he was saying about Westerns until maybe, halfway through when we have that scene that we've been discussing with Lou and Joe. But even then, I guess the idea of painting the Western genre as populated by hypocrites and just very selfish and self-involved people, that they're all out just for their own benefit and not really caring about anybody else. Even when they look like they're heroes, they're really self-centered and self-serving. That's kind of like what my reading this time was. Just basically the Soviet Union maybe telling America, telling the United States, you're not that much better. And so that's my first impression, which is pretty superficial, because like I said, I just went in not knowing anything, so I was just picking up from what little I know, my limited experience of Westerns, my limited experience of just Soviet cinema in general. But I have no doubt that there's more to it, just that you can just delve into, because it definitely it seems like it would be weird if there wasn't.
Yeah, it's
because
a classic
it's just
for a
such
reason.
a rich subject matter.
Yeah. What about you, Alex? You said you were reading stuff up about the film while watching it, but what's your takeaway from all of it?
Well, Homeboy, the guy who played Lemonade Joe, was a member of the a supporter of the Communist Party of Czechoslovakia at this time. So I think that plays into it. And I think, you cited John Wayne a little bit earlier in this. And, what I feel this movie, and again, it could be because it is a parody of the Western style of films, but more so than your John Waynes or Clint Eastwood outlaw Josie Wells type stuff. This movie definitely goes out of its way to almost to a comedic extent establish this is the good guy. This is the guy that you get behind and you support no matter what. These are the bad guys, and this is why they're the bad guys. And you don't question the good guy and his motives. And like I said, that's played almost to a comedic extent with the whole idea that he's just there to sell shit. He's just there because he's a salesman with like ruthless tendencies. But the narrative it tries to craft is that do not question what he's doing. He's doing it because it's good, which I think plays into an interesting idea when this movie's supposed to be a commentary of, against, for whatever communism, however you want to interpret it. I think it definitely adds to the mystique of what the movie's trying to say.
Yeah, I think that it obviously has very communist leanings, especially because of the people involved and the time period it is. But you also have to remember, like with Czechoslovakian history, they had like a really weird time. They came out of the First World War. They formed their own thing. They separated from the
the Austro-Hungary Empire.
Austro-Hungary Empire. And then World War II, they got occupied by the Nazis. And then after that, they get the Russians. And then after that, they separate into their own two states of countries. And it's this thing of like, yeah, maybe the guy who played Joe was a communist guy, but we don't know necessarily about the filmmakers. And I would imagine with most countries, Bartek, we're Polish. You can speak about how your mum grew up in Poland when it was underneath the communist rule. There was still animosity over the fact that communism was in charge of the country. Whether the Czech Republic or Czechoslovakia at the time had that overwhelming sense or not, that can be something mentioned to us in the comments from people, but I get the sense from the film that there is a definite, we don't like the West, but also let's still have subtle comments about how what we're going through right now isn't great either. I actually find there's moments in the film that are genuinely haunting when you think about it. Like, Joe deflowers and corrupts Winifred. There's this moment where they're singing at the bar and she's like throwing the flyers in the air, and then she just like removes the bottom part of her skirt so you could see her sexy legs and garters, and she's like kicking the air. And it's like, remember when she was like the suffragette lady at the beginning of the movie, like covered in clothes, and she was like the puritanical, and Joe has just warmed her up with his ideals so much that she's practically just whoring herself out, as much as Tornado Lou was for Trigger Whiskey.
Yeah, but Ezra Goodman approved.
So it's fine. And at the end, the solution to the problem is, how about we just combine both things, like both worldviews of Trigger Whiskey and Lemonade, and make it this one thing, and everyone can be happy. You could have an alternative. You could just be happy. And then the movie just ends like, yep, everyone's happy at the end. Even the guy who's like, too bad I'm a villain and I can't enjoy happiness. And they're like, no, you have a place too. You have a place with us underneath our values and our rules.
Because you're family.
You can accommodate what we want. And it's like haunting and kind of scary, but also, like you said, Alex, it's so comedically driven that you can't help but have a smile on your face at the end when the guy comes over. It's like, you've got millions and millions of dollars. No, billions of dollars. And they're like, whoa, and the oil's spewing out of the ground and all of that. But yeah, it's an interesting one to think about like that too, because again, what comedy movies do you question these things about? Any? Really? Not as much.
This is 40.
What was that?
No, I was kidding.
Oh,
This
fuck
is
that
40,
movie.
but that's...
Any Jason Bateman comedy, I question it all the time. I'm like, is capitalism a good thing when we have Jason Bateman comedies? I don't know.
Mr. Hamburger.
Mr. Hamburger, yeah, as we call him. One of our guests said that Jason Bateman looks exactly like a hamburger as a person. I don't know what that means.
But the tasty hamburger.
That's tasty. So that's it. Recommendation for the next episode is from the listening people.
Yes.
This is one of our very early recommendations, and I kind of hinted to it in a brief way. We next week are going to be doing the 1966 Batman movie with Adam West.
Okay.
When we talked about The Dark Knight Rises on our show,
Nice.
we talked about Adam West's Batman because there are a lot of Adam West Batman elements in The Dark Knight Rises, and one of our guest's friends he's a big fan of Adam West's Batman, said, well, you got to do that. You got to do that at some point. And I have been rewatching the Adam West Batman TV show over the last year, so it'll be a good thing to go to. So the Adam West Batman movie, the 1966 classic movie with the shark repellent and everything, and the bomb, we all know it in some way, but if you haven't seen it, make sure to check it out in the interim. It's a fun time to be had.
Yeah, I can't wait. I've never seen it.
And if you are a loser who's like, I don't like my Batman fun, then just don't bother, man.
You're a salad.
I can't wait for the Robert Pattinson movie, because from all I've seen of it is weirdly they're taking a lot of cues from Adam West's Batman, like visually, like his cat. There's a lot of stuff going on. We'll talk about it next week, but so check that out. You can check us out and the Contrarians out on those social medias. We have our Facebooks and Twitter, as do you guys. So that stuff will be in all of the description, and email us at spitandpolished@gmail.com to let us know your thoughts, questions, queries, and concerns, and give us recommendations. Is there something that you wish we touched upon with Lemonade Joe? What are your views on Lemonade Joe? Do you think it's a communist masterpiece or a subversive piece of text? Let us know.
And if we got anything wrong about its historical context, we'd be very interested to know, I guess.
Yeah. I've never actually spoken to an actual Czech person who has a lifetime with this movie. We only have a few years of a relationship with this movie. I would love to hear someone who this is their Blazing Saddles, right? Where we all grew up with Blazing Saddles and we understand a context about Blazing Saddles. I'd love to hear someone's perspective where that's theirs with this movie. So hit us up. Any wise words of wisdom you Contrarians want to leave us on?
I was thinking that if this movie was fresh on the tomato meter, it's got no tomato meter score, by the way. So yeah, we need it. Hopefully, this episode, Ryan, makes even a bigger splash. But if it was fresh and I had to argue against it, my strategy would have been to say that it was trying too hard to be funny, and that it would have benefited from just playing it straight.
Yeah.
I don't know if Alex had a strategy that he could have applied, but yeah, parting words is just watch this movie. It's good.
All the colors are wrong. There was no purple tint.
There was no purple tint. Where was the purple tint?
What does purple mean, Ryan?
Erection.